briefly introduce you, but I like to not steal people's limelight. I mean, you've listened to the podcast. So think of whatever you want to do to introduce yourself, and then I'll just ask questions based off of that, and then the conversation will just flow.
Right.
So.
We hope so, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it will.
Yeah. Every guest is different. Are you adjusting? Are you making us more tan? Less tan? But yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else. Anything else you have questions on?
It sure does make my gray hair look great.
I know these lights. It is weird. I always catch myself staring.
You know why I sit in the back row, don't you? Because I can't stand staring. I hate the mirror.
I thought it was because of your handstands. I like the back too.
Well, that too, and also there's probably other, but just to get in the back and not be looked at. But I can't imagine. Some people can sit in the mirror, and do the whole class.
Yeah.
And it freaks me out. I've had to do it in the front row, and I'm like, looking away.
I do think, I feel like they put mirrors. I feel like it's supposed to be for body alignment, not necessarily to look at yourself. But I feel like 99% of the population does it just to look at themselves. The studio I went to at home had no mirrors. It was all black, super loud music. And we took them away because we knew people would just look at themselves or critique or whatever it wasn't for alignment. But I also don't like facing the back in the small room because I feel like I can't balance for some reason.
Every time you have to move back a foot or two, or a foot or so to then do the bend. So there's some of that, but whatever. Hey, it's tough.
It's yoga.
Yeah.
Oh geez. All right, Spider, are you ready?
I think we're all good. If I might have to stop because this camera's flashing for some reason.
Which one?
It's the one on the right.
Is that me or is that him?
It's him.
It's
but
him.
If it keeps doing it, then I'm going to switch it to that other camera. But I'll just wave you down and let you know before I.
Okay.
I mean, you can do it now too if you wanted.
Yeah, I might as well.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah, we're not in a rush. I don't see it flashing. Sometimes I can. Well, all right.
Can I ask you a couple questions before we get started?
Yeah, of course.
Or we can talk. I'm sure you don't want me to. But the podcast, how many the new format? How many episodes have you done? And kind of what's the latest of the podcast? I guess.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. I was just telling him before when you were in the bathroom. So I'm doing, it's called a podcast accelerator course right now. I basically just wanted, they're a top 30 podcast in the world, and they just put on this program for people who are aspiring podcasters. I kind of thought of it as yoga teacher training. So I had to pay and invest to become a yoga instructor. So it's kind of the same thing. But they just gave me really candid feedback that I think I needed, just of where I wanted to go. And what I had a feeling it was good and go, and what I was good at and then what I wasn't good at. So basically she was like, your social media needs help. That's the only way that this is going to grow, which I already knew. I'm just not good at social media. What? Yeah, I like to think I'm pretty self-aware of what I'm good at and what I'm not.
That's good though, right? In general, to be aware of it, because most people just, they don't want to really look in the mirror,
Yeah.
Like me. I don't like to look in the mirror.
Yeah. So that was really good. And she basically was like, you are really good at interviewing. You make people feel comfortable, which is all the feedback that I've got from Gus. And if you feel differently after, please tell me any feedback you have. I love it. So she was like, that's the direction that you need to keep going. But the only way for you to grow is to get your social media, get everything branded the right way. So I'm going to keep going down this direction. And I really want to focus on people like you in the majority of entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of podcasts like Tony Robbins, Joe Rogan, they focus on the super successful people with a million followers. But I think they kind of lose touch with reality. I feel like they talk about a lot of things that are very raw, but there's no tangible steps, or it's hard to relate to them because you're okay, I'm not worth $600 million. And how can I get there?
And also even just some of those people, it does sound, we're not on right now, right?
No.
It sounds a little echoey in my ear. Is that normal? Is that just how it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never had them on, so I don't know.
What do you mean echoey? I'm echoey?
No, I hear my own voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of freaking me out.
It just once you like start the conversation and stuff, you won't even notice it anymore.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something like, incorrect about the deal or whatever. So that's great. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. No, these are, you should hear.
We
But
were-
yeah, so that's what I'm want to focus on is just like the majority of people. Like I thought about getting like Nicole and Colleen on.
Yeah.
I have a lot of ideas of people, especially in Dallas. Like I feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurs that aren't super well known.
Well, but I mean, that's attainable. Some
Yeah.
of the people that are just like, in the stratosphere, people give up, right? They're like, oh, there's no way, but if it's a normal person that's, worked hard or done something well, or, it's at least attainable. Is that what you're going for?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's one thing that I've noticed about myself is that like I have big goals and big dreams, but I feel like you listen to some of these people like Ed Milet that just bought an island in Maine and you're like, what the hell? Like for someone that's young and like wants to be an entrepreneur or wants to leave their corporate job, it's like how, not that you can't listen to him, but it's kind of hard to relate to him.
Right.
And I just hope that I never get to that place. It's like, obviously I want this podcast to get big and like be a full-time career, but I just hope that I never lose that sense of like realistic and like touch with an audience. Cause I think that's what a lot of big podcasts lose.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I always say like, I don't know where it's going to go when people are like, shouldn't you know that? I'm like, yeah, but you changed so much. I think it's going to evolve and like, what I started a year ago is not going to be the same thing in 5 years. So I'm kind of just going with it and building off of it.
And even if whatever it morphs into or wherever it goes, it's good training.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's like I tell people learn to sell. Have a sales job at some point.
Yeah.
Or,
that's what I do now. Yeah.
Or a waiter. Being a waiter is a great job. To learning to serve people and be aware, be a part of a team. There's so many jobs that it doesn't mean you have to do it the rest of your life, but it's good training because people that don't have that experience, they, lacking in some ways, I think, because they've never had to serve or never had to sell or,
Yeah, that's kind of my thought process right now too, because I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My job now is very rigorous and just a very intense, exhausting, all of it, but it's teaching me how to sell and it's teaching me things that I know wherever I go, it'll go with me. So
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. All right, Spider, are we ready?
All good.
All good. All right, Ryan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I need to wake up.
Are you ready? Yeah. Whoa.
I always find energy.
You don't seem tired.
I know. I just
Yeah.
I think it's the weather, if you want my honest opinion. Like, I feel like when the weather turns and it gets dark out,
Right.
my just boom. I
Mhm.
always have a lot of energy, but all right. 3, 2, 1, go. Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Pop Podcast. I am your host, Erin Groves, and we have another very special guest on the podcast this week. I mentioned him briefly on social media last week. He is someone that I actually met through a yoga class, all about networking, took some of our key takeaways from previous episodes, and I met who we have on the podcast, Ryan Houston. Welcome. Say hello.
Hi there.
He's super excited to be here. So, like I mentioned, Ryan and I met in a yoga class, and it was right when I started the podcast. And I remember him being like, I listened to your podcast, and we started get to talking, and I learned a little bit about what he does for a living. I was like, he would be a perfect guest to have on. And I say this every episode, but I don't like to steal your limelight and, take everything that you have to say about yourself. But Ryan is an entrepreneur, builds houses for a lot of people in the DFW area. He also has a sod business, which I just learned about, does some things out on a ranch, has cows. So Ryan Houston, introduce yourself. Who are you?
It's kind of weird when people look at me and I tell them I'm a yogi, builder, sod farmer, rancher. Hey, it's kind of a weird deal, and it just happens to be my background and where I came from and where the path led me, I guess. Which we're all on a path, right? And we don't really know where it's going, but here we are. So I from Dallas, went to St. Mark's, went to SMU, and studied finance, and really was geared up to that finance deal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And, spreadsheets, number crunching. I didn't have any real guidance of like anybody, a mentor, or anybody that was like, no, this is what you need to do. So I was just like learning from older guys that really didn't, probably 22-year-old guys that didn't know anything either, and where you should go, what you should do, what job you should do. So, oh yeah, finance, that's the way to go, So, and I was fine. I was smart and,
Yeah.
got good grades and all that. And my first job was for an oil and gas company in Fort Worth, Union Pacific Resources. And, went to work for them and they kind of had a rotation where they, the first 6 months is in their audit department. So you learn the numbers and so forth. And then the next, you go to a different part of the company. But within 6 months, they'd already merged with another company down in Houston. So in 2000, I found myself without a job. But at the time, they gave a severance package of, I think, 6 months, which was like amazing at that time because I was like, I'm rich, I'm like, I quit. Can I retire yet? And so what did I do? I went to the ranch because it's just south of Fort Worth. The company was in Fort Worth, and that's really what my interest was. And the land, and it's a family ranch. I didn't buy it, so it's but something my grandfather taught me a lot about, and the operations. And I mean, if you would ask me back then, what do you really want to do? I'd be like, I want to be a cowboy, or want to run a ranch. And my dad's on the other side. He's part of the ranch, but not he didn't believe in that career choice, right? Because it's not going to make any money, and just for whatever reasons, he didn't think that was cool. So I went down there looking for a job, and in 2000, that was right when the NASDAQ had crashed, and finance jobs. I got a job at a school, but then that spring the NASDAQ went, I don't know what the numbers are, but just plummeted. So trying to find a job in the fall of 2000, was tough. And if in the jobs that I was offered, they were really bad, and they didn't really make much money. So to pay bills after my 4, 6, I think I took a couple months off, but I was always a project guy. Always did little builds, or if there was like a handy guy around, like I was, oh, yeah, Ryan's got a truck and he can figure it out. And I was like, and so I kind of took on that role, and I didn't know what I was doing, knew nothing, but I needed to, needed a place to live at the ranch, because by that time it's not really cool to like be living with your parents, or trying to have like your girlfriend down and be like, yeah, my parents are upstairs, and so I redid this ranch house. It was the old foreman's house, and it was total piece of junk, and just learned by figuring it out. And we didn't have YouTube back then either, so you had to like ask people. Like, I'm sure they had YouTube, but I wasn't smart enough to like, there wasn't, and they didn't have a gazillion like how to do it yourself kind of things. So started this little project and redid the bath, and everybody, and I made it nice, and I kind of wanted to do a good job. And so everybody that came to the ranch, even though it wasn't like, it was very small, but it was really well done, and everybody was, gave me some accolades because of that. Still, I mean, I look back and it was, terrible, but it gave me that little boost of like, wait a minute, I can do something,
Yeah.
And so I got a job by a local builder, a Highland Park builder that did high-end homes. I was at a Christmas party it must have been a Christmas party, and he was like a well-known builder, and I wasn't even thinking of pitching to him, but I got stuck in the corner and at this Christmas party, and I was like, yeah, how's building going? He's like, oh yeah, we're doing great, blowing and going. And he's like, well, what are you doing? I was like, well, not much. I got laid off. They merged with a company down in Houston, and kind of looking around. I've been interviewing, but that's it's pretty tough right now. Everybody can give themselves an excuse of like of why they're not doing the right thing, the economy or COVID or whatever. So I was giving myself the excuses, and he said, "Well, why don't you come work for me?" And I was like, but builder, like, okay. I mean, I didn't say it like that, but I was almost like, I had a finance degree, and I'm supposed to be like, a finance guy or something like that. But I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, it would be kind of neat to learn more, and why not? And it would be great to, make some money, because this 6 month severance is going to be gone here pretty quick. So just started working for him, and worked for, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years, and just learned. And, they stuck me on a house over in Highland Park, $3 or $4 million house. And I didn't have to make any, big decisions, but at the end you have to finish a house. And so they say finishing the house is the hardest thing to do. It's the details, it's the minutia. A lot of builders that are established, I mean, I finish my own houses, but like when you have a big company, it's kind of like what you put, whoever on to do all the little tedious work, and then deal with the homeowner that's by the end is, worn out of money. Usually the husband and wife of, it's stressful, and,
Yeah.
they're getting after it. And so, anyway, that's how it started in the building business. And I worked for him for a couple years, and then I was like, I can do this. And, had some connections, and somebody, in the community thought could do it. And so I quit and, built their house, which that wasn't probably, in hindsight, they got a great value, and I just stayed on it and didn't want to fail, and just worked and figured it out and kept on it. But in hindsight, I mean, it was definitely fake it till you make it kind of territory.
It's so funny too, because when you listen to people's stories, and you mentioned at the beginning, we all have a journey, which is something that I always touch on this podcast, and really why I did it, because you listen to stories like that. And I think the first thing that I want to build off of, and you've repeated it multiple times, is that, well, A, you fake it till you make it, but B, you just figured it out. And I think there's a huge misconception, and there's a lot of people out there who will A, do what you just said, of make excuses instead of just figuring it out. You didn't have YouTube. We have access now to more resources than we really truly ever have. So for the audience out there listening, whether they're going into home building, and this is why they're tuning into the episode, or anything else, touch on how you just continued to keep doing it, and you quote unquote figured it out. Were there tangible things you did, or what advice could you give for people listening?
Yeah. I think it starts from an early age, and I have teenagers now. And so I'm watching them as they grow, and lie to themselves basically about things they can or can't do, because that's what people do. We talk about it. Everybody can do more. They're capable of more than they believe themselves. So eventually you have to trust yourself enough to try it and not be afraid to fail. And all these things they've been told over and over and over again, but it is true. Nobody knows, especially coming out of the gate as a teenager. I mean, there's some successful, smart, individuals that have developed or matured at a faster rate, but everybody is faking it till they make it at some level, and what I'm telling my kids right now is, don't lie to yourself. Whatever your excuse you're giving yourself of why you can or cannot, there's doors that shut. But if you open that door and at least explore it fully, whether you can or can't do it. I mean, sometimes it's true. Sometimes you can't do something, but did you give it the full effort to see if that actually was possible or not possible? So I think that's, I always had, for some reason, I did have fear, of course, but I kind of, at some point, was just like, you know what? If it doesn't work, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'll be right where I was. So why not, give it a roll or whatever.
That's really important. And we got into fear a lot sooner than we do in most episodes. But I think fear of failure or fear of being embarrassed or fear of people judging you. I think there's a lot of fears that people navigate in their life. And you just hit the nail on the head of it's really not that big of a deal. Like if you go and you take a step, and I always say too, like on the opposite side of that. So say you go out and you launch something and it doesn't work, you still learn something. You
Yeah.
either learn that you're not good at it, that you are good at it, and that you did it the wrong way, or how to adjust. I feel like there's so many people. And a question to you: when you left your job with the builder that first gave you an opportunity and then you went to do your own thing and build houses, was there a time or mistakes that you made when you first, or failures that you had when you initially left, that you look back on now and you're like, duh, why did I do that?
Yes,
Yeah.
like too many. And my parents, for instance, were, you have a good job, they really trust you now, and what are you doing? They were actually the ones that were more fearful than I was, and I'm so glad, and I'm so glad I didn't listen to them. I probably did it just to spite them in some weird ways, But yeah, I mean the mistakes, you make mistakes. It's just part of it. And the advice I would give people when they are in the middle of a mistake, or is be honest with yourself quickly, whether it's a mistake or not a mistake, and own it. Because a lot of people will lie to themselves about the decision they made, and I've done that. That's the worst, when it's a mistake and you just keep on, trying to fake it till you make it, or whatever, trying to work it through instead of just like ripping the Band-Aid off, stop, fire the person. Owning it is owning it to yourself first, but then whoever you're working with. And that took a long time, by the way, because most people, ego is what gets in the way of a lot of people. It's just a problem, and getting over that is admitting a mistake and then moving forward. That takes some time, I think.
Yeah, and we talked about this when we first, we're talking about the podcast and everything, and you were talking about there's a lot of people that you've met who have like the victim mentality, that they don't want to admit to the mistakes, or they'll just blame other people. And I see that a lot. If someone goes out and make a mistake, I think a lot of it has to do with ego. They're embarrassed and they don't want to be the one to own it. But I also think on the flip side of that, people that are super successful, they do admit to those mistakes early, because then you're fixing it faster. If you're like, hey, I messed up and I hired the wrong person, and you get rid of them now versus a year down the road, you're just solving that problem and solving that issue sooner rather than waiting however long to figure it out.
And the truth is clients, especially the ones I work for, they're really smart. And so they can read through the bullshit instantly.
Yeah.
And I think I picked up on that when I was trying to like, oh, it's going to be all right. And, the normal builder, that builders are known for this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like very common for them to just try to like, make excuses and, I don't know, blame other people or blame all the different things. I'm a little different now as a builder, that I only build one house at a time, and they're big. But I don't have that I did have that problem. That was one of my mistakes early in my career. It wasn't a mistake per se, but it was thinking I could do more than I really was capable of doing with the amount of time. So taking on too many projects. And I remember at one point I had I think it was 5 or 6 projects going. This is all before the crash. And, the housing crashed in 2008, and it was just blowing and going. And I was hiring people that were not qualified, that didn't really help me. In fact, they actually caused me more problems. So, I would say being honest with what you can take on yourself instead. I mean, you only have so much time in a day, but clients, when you work for clients, and they can smell and read the lack of confidence, the lack of attention. I mean, you know instantly whether somebody's like full of shit or not, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you can kind of feel whether it's, So after that episode, when I was, strung out, and I didn't I finished the houses and everything, but I would say I've done a lot better. I could have done a lot better job. You know what I mean? And more attention to detail or whatever. But that's why later my model went to more of a just, and thankfully I was, got some of these really nice size, big, highly detailed projects that allowed me just to do one. Because when you're young and you're getting remodels, well, yeah, you got to get 4 or 5, a kitchen or an addition, whatever. I mean, you don't really have a choice. You can't just go to the top of the and be like, yes, I'd like to build this, whatever, $20-30 million house. That's all I'm doing. It just didn't work that way.
Yeah, you got to work. You got to work your way up, which I think is hard too. A lot of people, and you hear the same story over and over again of whatever someone started, you thought you were going to do finance, and then what you ended up doing now is building houses. And do you feel that initial feedback when you first started building the bathtub that you talked about, that you look back now and you're like, okay, it wasn't that great of a job? Do you feel like getting that feedback in your life and having that minor success led you in the direction that you eventually went?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just picking up. I mean, first of all, everybody says it, but you have to do something that you really are passionate about and interested in. I mean, that goes a long way. So when I was at my first job as an analyst in the audit department, I mean, I'm not. It just wasn't for me, and it was. I really looked in the mirror and I was like, wait a minute, is this my life? Am I going to be? Am I going to be a numbers guy building a spreadsheet and then presenting it to, I just don't know if I can do it. I mean, I'm sure I could do it, but does that excite me? It didn't, and all I was doing was staring out the window and, thinking about, wakeboarding or whatever on the weekend, which is okay too. But it's that in those days, I think it's really important to find something that you really are passionate about that has viability of making money, or making a living anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard too for some people that they could be really passionate about wakeboarding or snowboarding, but there kind of comes, and we had this conversation of like, okay, look in the mirror. Is this something that you can potentially make an income off of? And I think there's sometimes a disconnect between like reality and maybe what is something that, I love doing this, but there's no way for me to monetize it, or there's no way to make a living. So I really encourage people out there that if you find something that you're passionate about and something that could potentially make a lot of money, I think Mike said this before, like the sky is the limit. And so you still are building houses. I know you're on a big project right now out at the ranch. And then we talked about this. Touch a little bit about your sod business that you went into. First off, I've never heard of it. So if there's someone out there that is like Ryan, loves the ranch, this is a really cool idea, and touch on how you got into it, because that's another cool story behind it as well.
Yeah. So like I said early on when I was at the ranch, that's and that's what that was what I was most interested in those days was, all things ranch, fishing, hunting, cattle, horses, all those things, but it wasn't realistic, at the time, especially with the family too, and different family members. It wasn't an option, and that I'm glad it wasn't an option too, because that wouldn't have pushed me to do all these other things too. If I would have just been the family ranch, I mean, nothing against that either, but I wouldn't have grown and had to do all these other things. But so all along, throughout building and building and making a little bit of money and things like that, I was always a saver, and I mean, at the time, early in my 20s, there's, you make a little bit of money and a lot of guys go out and buy a fancy car or whatever, or whatever it may be. And I was just, I think that was part of like the family tradition of just saving money, but kind of the Dave Ramsey kind of like mentality of like, buy assets, and buy things that are going to produce money rather than, so that was big. That's some of the best lessons I learned from my dad family, was just saving and buying assets rather than liabilities. So, back in those days, I bought a duplex, and we lived my wife and I got married and lived in the top floor, and then leased the bottom floor out, which I like highly recommend. If you can figure out a way to create an income producer, I mean, that's a whole different podcast, and I'm not the expert on that at all. But like learning to save and then deferred, gratification of income rather than just buying something stupid that I'm so glad I didn't buy, because those fancy cars, you know what I mean? It just it's such a fleeting thing. So while I was making some money, the ranch, my grandfather died. There was a period of maybe 4 or 5 years where it was, we leased it to a cattle guy, and then, that guy came in and overgrazed it. And, we'd find beer bottles out in the pasture and stuff. I mean, he was just using, not taking care of it. Right. So, I got a friend, a really good friend. I actually mentioned him to you. His name's Philip Lang. He worked for a company called Turfgrass of America. So it's a sod company. You see on pallets of grass.
Yeah.
He actually worked for the company, and he said, you need to talk to these guys because they're looking for more land to have a sod farm, and it's in your area, and we're on just south of Glen Rose on the Brazos River. And so the things you need for a sod farm are proximity to the Metroplex, you need water, and you need, enough to make it viable. Like 100 acres is kind of a good sweet spot to put in a center pivot. So a center pivot is when you fly over, and you see circles across the country. Those aren't like crop circles. They're not like, farmers doing weird like patterns or thinking it's fun. It's because of this. In the middle is the water, where the water comes out of the ground, and then it's a long, sometimes up to 2,000. I mean, some even longer irrigation piece of equipment that goes around in a circle. So I bought a pivot and then leased it to this sod farm. But I bought it with my own money on the family ranch. I got permission. I was like, hey, I'm going to do this deal in this pasture over this one field over here. It's currently a wheat field. It's making, $3,000 or $4,000 a year. I'll contribute that $3,000 or $4,000 to, or lease, or, I'm almost like subleasing it, but then turning it around. And I bought, it was $67,000 was the pivot and the pump. And I'd saved the money to do it, or I had more than that, but I made the deal. And everybody that family members even were like, "Well, how do you know the guy's going to pay you?" And what, like, do you have some sort of contract, or what? I mean, that contract's not worth the paper it's written on, and it's almost like the more feedback like that I got, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna prove you wrong, because I've done my and even if it doesn't work out, I'll grow something else on it. And because the guy, I did get some advice from that. I asked the guy for a down payment, a bigger down payment than he wanted to give, and I just walked away. And I was like, you know what? That's all I can do. Well, he paid the first year's. The deal was he's gonna have to pay the first year up front, which was $35,000. That was our deal, and I had to come up with whatever 65. So I was only out that amount of money for the first year, but by a year, only 12 months in, I was almost whole, so that that helped a lot, pushed me over the edge to say, okay, this is worth it. So it worked out. I mean, that was in like 2003, and the same tenant just left the ranch, I guess 2 years ago, but it's because we kept on extending. But the sod, that's where the sod business started. So there's currently now 3 center pivots. So in 2014 or 15, I'm, still building, and, probably made some money, and thinking like, I've invested in all these other people's deals, and some of them were good. And, there was a double here and triple here, but then there was a lot of deals that I invested in that were zeros. And, it just was frustrating, because I was the sideline watching what happened. I'm like, God, this is the dump. Like, I cannot, I felt out of control. I just was watching some ego and some greed, where you could have turned this one in particular deal I'm talking about. I'm not going to give any details, but they had a double in maybe 6 months. And instead of that, they kind of, which is okay. They thought it was going to be more like a 8 or 10, but once they got into the deal more, then ego got in the way and who's in control, and it all ended up blowing up into a 100% loss. And I just watched this whole thing unfold, and I was like, I'm not investing in anybody else's deal again. I'm out. Like maybe something very small or something, and I'm sure I've like missed out on tons of deals. I get it. I'm sure I should have, been more involved or whatever. But the way I look at it is, at least if I'm going to put the money in and it's my deal, my control, and it totally fails, it's my own damn fault if it fails, right? So, in the sod investment was a good deal. It was a really good deal. It was a steady deal. I mean, every year and there was some escalations, and I was getting like $40,000 a year, just on the side. So it just made things, that was money that I didn't even have to, think about, work about. And it was pretty too. You go out there and it's a field, 100-acre field that's mowed up, we camp on, it's just a nice, pretty thing that's improving the ranch. And that's really my long-term goal. Was I feel this obligation, it was a gift. I didn't pay for it, but it's something that I want to continue to beautify and take care of. But you can't do that without money. It takes money. It takes ideas. You can't, unless you're just super rich and you have a family that just wants to spend. I mean, I can do that. I mean, it's not easy, but it's like, so I was faced with, how do you create money? That's what I would, late at night, what do I think about? Or did I think about? How can I use this land to make the most amount of money?
Yeah.
To then be able to, take care of my family and do fun things and go on, stuff, but also be able to put that money back into taking care of it, which it really does. I mean, it could be $500,000 kind of, I mean, if you did a lot of improvements and you went to a big ranch, I mean, roads and fences, and I mean, it's a lot,
Yeah.
So, we're back to the question of like how the sod business, how did it go? In 2015, I put in another center pivot because that was a good deal, and I didn't want to invest in any of these other bad deals where it felt out of control. So I partnered with a really high-end sod company that does sports fields, golf courses, the Texas Rangers, Tritex grass. Shout out to Tritex grass. Yeah,
we'll get them on the podcast.
Yeah, right. Get them on the grass. They had a great reputation in the business. Of the projects, these are more project grass. Like Clyde Warren Park has the grass, off the ranch. Lots of golf courses that you would know of, they would do the work. So I approached them and said, I've got a sod farm, that I'm leasing to a guy, and, I build homes, and just kind of made an introduction through a mutual friend. And at first they were just like, yeah, great. No, thanks. We're good. That's sweet of you to, to reach out to us. And I don't know, it's like maybe months later, somehow got him down. I was like, you just need to come and look at it. I think it's a good, it just talked him into it. And they happen to like to ride Harleys, and they were like, so their excuse was, okay, yeah, we're going to be on our Harleys though. It's kind of weird, but at least we'll ride out there and check it out. So we ended up driving around the ranch, and I think they got to know me and knew that I was not, just a bullshitter, and, would potentially follow through. And they needed, there's another variety of grass, a special Bermuda grass that they were real excited about. I didn't know this at the time, but that they didn't have the land for, so they and the economy was, was after the 2008, and after 2008, sod farms were in big trouble. There was no housing being built, so a lot of sod farms suffered. So they had started another farm down in College Station area before, in and around 2008, before really. And so they weren't just blown to go to do any more investing. They were really just kind of, waiting for things to happen. So I worked out a contract grow agreement to grow this Bermuda variety of grass, put in a new center pivot and pumps and level the field and the fencing and all that to keep all the hogs out. And we started in 2015, and it was turned out to be a 112-acre field. And it, it worked out. I it had to take a risk, and I knew that they were more of a substantial, tenant and had a company. So I was like, I got to do my part in this one and come through, which in the farming, there's just always obstacles. There's always challenges. I mean, the river floods and go on and on and on. But that's, and then since then, I'm no longer taking care of the field. So part of our original agreement was, myself and the guys that work for me, we would fertilize, weed kill, mow, and get it all perfectly ready. It looks like a golf course. And then they would come in and harvest, grass for these different projects, usually like a big golf course. They'd sell 30, 50 acres. And, one day the grass is there, and then the next day they roll it up. And when they would roll it up and it's going off the ranch, I would get paid when, by the foot as things, got harvested. So that was our agreement. And then now they have a full-time crew. We've renegotiated the contract, and which is great. I put in another pivot, so I paid for another pivot, pump, and fencing and all that. That was in 19, and now there's 350 acres, and they are maintaining it better than I did, really, because they have 5 guys full time. So it's great. All the family members that my family members really enjoy it. Get to drive through, and it's mowed up and beautiful, and all the Indian princesses and Indian guides out there. There's been I don't know how many campouts, because it's the best place in the world to camp, because it's 100 acres of just perfectly green, beautiful grass. And the moms, when they come out of Dallas and they get into the country, or dads for that matter, especially dads these days, everybody's anxious. It's like we're worried about snakes and stickers and whatever. And so like the second they can't see their kid in the country, you can just see it on their face. They just start freaking out. They're like, but out there on the sod field, there's not a sticker on it. It's grass. And so everybody that gets there completely relaxes, which is really neat. And it's, comfortable, and the tents, level. Have you ever been camping and been on like a hill and everybody rolls down to one side of the
No.
Never done that?
It's so interesting though, because I feel like this is one thing that I've learned about Texas, and like a lot of my coworkers, one of them has done really well at my job, and he has like 2,000 acres of land. And I've never understood why someone would want to buy 2,000 acres of land. But now talking to you and understanding, like there definitely is like passive income to be made on it. And I think you're right, like investing in assets and not a liability, like purchasing land that you can lease out, or a duplex. That's something that I thought of recently. Like, how can you make money off of the money that you've already saved and like continue to invest that back? But no, I'm not the biggest camping
Not
type.
a big camper, yeah.
Maybe in Ohio because it was cold, but no.
Well, anyway, that I was saying how nice it was that to use it, and everybody gets to use it. I'm hosting my daughter's 5th grade camp out in a couple weeks, but one of the guys that I've become good friends with in the 5th grade, he has a 1st grader, and he's like, well, we don't have any place to camp. And now I'm like hosting all of the Providence, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I'm happy to do it. It's great. It's like, why not use it? And it's fun to share it with everybody. And so that's been another plus, is that it's kind of, it was a creation of something really beautiful and cool that actually could be used also, which is rare. I don't know how you figure that one out. I don't know. I wasn't planning for that. I was just trying to like make some money off of grass, and then it turned into this, let's go to the sod farm and, kick the ball or just hang out or whatever. So that's been cool.
It's so interesting. And it kind of goes back to when you were a kid, you wanted to be you wanted to hang out on the ranch all the time, and now you've created that place where it's like your kids are going, their friends are going to just hang out, and it's a place where people enjoy and can relax. So it kind of goes back to, you always say that people have the vision of like quote unquote what they want to do when they're little, and then when they're older it's some break off of that, it's like some revelation of that, so you're doing that. But I do think that you said something that I've noticed a lot of entrepreneurial type people have, and that's just wanting control over the things that they are doing and the investments that you're making. From your perspective, I find it so interesting that the deals that you were losing, you didn't have as much control over, and the deals that you were winning, you did have more control over. From your perspective, and for people out there listening, touch on that a little bit more.
Well,
Control
first
CH.
of all, I might have said it in that way, but I didn't totally mean it, because there have been things and ideas
Yeah, well,
that I've
absolutely.
done that have turned in, to complete dog shit.
Yeah.
So it does happen, but I mean, at least it's my fault, right?
Exactly.
At least I'd learned and grew, and so yeah, I think anybody, if I was here to say, oh yeah, if everyone I was in control, I nailed every one of them. That's just not the case. But
Yeah.
at least I felt like, oh, that's what I did wrong, or I didn't think about that or whatever. But in general, it didn't feel scary. It just, when you're investing with, I was just frustrated, I guess is a good way to say it, that, I didn't feel like I had any control of the outcome. And that's why I decided to do the commitment to myself to do my own thing, I guess. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's important. That's something that I feel like a lot of people who leave corporate and go elsewhere and start their own things, it kind of comes down to that same thing. And we touched on it last episode, who he went into real estate, did corporate sales for forever, but he's like, they could let me go to tomorrow, my territory could get taken, and then you go into
Right.
this in real estate and you're building something that you have control over. And it's not to say that you didn't lose things, but I also feel like when you're in business with other people, it's just the name of the game. You're navigating different personalities. What's important to them might not be as important to you. I feel like it's just a life lesson. But I always find it so interesting that it's one of those common themes that a lot of entrepreneurs touch on, is like, I just wanted control over the things I was going into.
And probably also think about working for somebody else and pushing into something really hard and doing an amazing job, and you did it. Your boss probably knows you did it, but did you really get the full credit of that? No. Like the monetarily, no. Oh, here's your bonus. Great job, or like maybe not much of a bonus at all, or recognition in some ways. So I think that wasn't really my experience, so to speak, but I would think if I would, that would be another reason to at least try your own thing if you have that dream, because I would get frustrated by that.
Yeah, it definitely is frustrating. Or you're putting all of this work into something and you're like, I feel like I'm losing control of it, or I feel like it doesn't matter how much I try or how much effort I put into this. At the end of the day, it's not up to me.
Yeah.
When you have a boss, or you're not just reporting to yourself, which is why, I've gone down this route with the podcast, and it's why I interview people like you, because I think everyone who's left and gone on to do their same thing, a lot of it I think is a personality trait. Like I feel like a lot of people that I've interviewed are just wired differently. Like we want to go off and do our own thing. And this was something that I heard elsewhere, which I'd love to get your feedback on, is, I don't know if it was a quote, I heard it on a podcast. I was talking about when you're working for someone else versus working for yourself, it's 10 times harder to work for yourself, but it's also that much more rewarding. Do you feel like I feel like I know the answer to this, but I just find it intriguing from your perspective. Do you feel like you worked a lot harder in corporate, or do you feel like you worked not as hard?
No. I mean, when I was a builder,
Yeah.
I'm half-assed it, took long lunches. Anytime my friends were like, oh yeah, we're going over here to lunch, and it would be that I would be there at Thursday or Friday especially when it was time to like go wakeboarding. I mean, I was like, okay, I know my boss, I know he's there, so I'm just gonna like, oh yeah, I'm good. I think I can leave at 2:00 this time, and everybody's like, yeah, great, I mean, but when you work for yourself, that all changes. But because you are the only one that can, that the buck stops with you, so you've got to do it. Now, some people don't aren't cut out for that and they don't want to do it. And I get it. I mean, sometimes I wondered through this whole thing, would it have been better, to just mail it in and, not mail it in. That sounds terrible, but
Yeah.
just do a job, do a corporate job, and just, be safe, And I think ultimately, fear is what keeps was what would have kept me there. And some people, and fear is, pain. So we're all afraid. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? Well, that sounds real. That could be terrible, and that'd be painful. And I think some people just have a bigger pain tolerance, right? I mean, and they're not, just from a fear standpoint. I mean, we talk about it, in working out or things like that, or yoga. It's like, is that pain really? It is painful, but is it really? It doesn't kill you; it makes you stronger, And so, and it helps you to grow. So I didn't know all this at the time. I mean, early on for sure, but now, the older I am, that I yearn for something that's hard and sometimes fearful or painful. Nothing crazy, but I know that that's where the satisfaction and growth comes from.
I would 1000% agree. And we'll kind of finish off the podcast on a yoga note, because it's so interesting for me why I became a yoga instructor. It's the things that you're saying and just like the things that you've noticed about yourself. But I think fear is something that I ask a lot of different people. And, I had Lou on previously, who was an Olympic athlete coaching Olympians. And so for him and coaching, fear with his athletes was like fear of not winning or fear of doing this. So it was an outcome. From your perspective and people out there, I think fear is something that I deal with all the time. Are there a few pieces of advice, whether it's 2 or 3 things that you've done to help you get past that, or actions that you've taken to help you?
Yeah, deal with fear.
Or overcome?
I think just getting accustomed to being in a state of pain or whatever it may be, in fear. I think just if the more you're in you can just allow yourself to at least put your toe in the water, I think then you realize it's not that big a deal, and it's not that bad. And also, like, when it comes to like social fear, what we all especially face, what are people going to say, or what and what I've later on in life, I believe anyway, is that people really don't care. I mean, ultimately, other people, those people that you think what are they going to say, or what are they going to do? Well, they might say or say something, but at the end of the day, do they? What you do with your time and with your energy, or that's your life, your track, your role. So, not doing something because worrying about what everybody else is going to say or how they're going to react to you. For some reason, when I would get that energy, from people, it actually made me want to do it more, and so maybe that's my, I don't know, messed up, personality or whatever. But, so that, also later on in life, even with yoga, anxiety is something that everybody, I think, faces, deals with, and means fear is right in there with anxiety. That's they go hand in hand. But just being present, I know that's like the buzzword now, is being present, but fear is being worried about something that's not right in front of you most of the time.
Well, that's not real.
It's not real.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves a story in our head and then don't act on it. Don't do anything and just stay wherever we are in fear because of whatever the situation may be. So, for me, learning to that anxiety, at least some action item, anything. It might even just be like going for a walk, or noticing, being kind to, or whatever, some way to like learning how to heal, basically. So I know that I jumped off on a tangent there, but I think that was the biggest thing for me is learning. If you wrote down when you're in a very anxious state, like what you're feeling, what you're really thinking, and what you're fearful of, and then you just take your time and do something actionable that you like. Walks, dogs, whatever, friends, being kind, and then really delve into like, okay, was I fearful? Was I anxious at that time? Well, I did something that was actionable to get my mind into a better space that then I could maybe do something else that would benefit my life. So that's a skill that takes time to learn. And I'm trying to teach my kids that it's learning how to heal yourself and being aware of your state, right? Whether you are anxious or sad or whatever it may be. Just learning what the way to heal yourself. And that sounds a little woo-woo, but I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah. It's helpful, and I think everyone navigates through fear differently, but I think there's a lot of people out there, and I always encourage people that are listening to this podcast to just keep going. And it's always, you said, take action. And whether that action is like going for a walk or meditating or whatever it is that helps you kind of, debrief, understand where you're at, like acknowledge where you are. And this is something that my mom always says, like anytime I'm upset, she's like, it's okay to be sad, feel it, and then move on. Like, what can you do to get better? What can you do to keep moving? You're only hurting yourself by staying exactly where you are. And I feel like that's what you're trying to teach your kids right now, is that you can stay in fear, but it's never going to change. You're not going to be happier if you just sit there and like allow yourself to for fear to take you over, or take control of you, instead of you saying, hey, I'm fearful of this outcome. That outcome is not real right now. So just keep taking a step forward and keep moving, which I feel like is exactly what you've done in your life.
It's exactly. And exercise was very important for that, because when I would, it wasn't that I was trying to, win any sport or be whatever. It just was it was a way to, medicine. And I learned it at an early age when I would be freaking out or nervous or scared or, worried that it was going to work out. I learned that, okay, I can just go like push into a workout or go for a bike ride or whatever, and kind of get into more of that meditative state of just, being in the world. And a lot of times working out some of those problems while, you're working or spinning or whatever it may be. So for me, that's what exercise was, the best medicine for mental health, right? I mean, that's the buzzword right now, but it's really true.
Yeah. And I remember you and I had a conversation, and it was like, I feel like a light bulb went off in your head. We were in a yoga class, and you're like, I feel like I'm just so much more calm and so much more productive ever since I've been going to Ritual One. And I know that's something that like you wanted to talk about today. So you've touched on how exercise has helped you, and this is something that I preach to all my friends, to everyone. I mean, I do it every day for that reason. What has yoga done for you? Is there certain things that you've noticed about yourself that maybe you didn't notice before?
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me at age 30 that I was going to be a 44-year-old yogi going like wanting to go every day, I can't go, but I would. I would have not believed you. You're a liar. It's not a case. But so we all quarantined at the ranch, as a family and there was 2 other families, and we had by all accounts, we had a great experience. There was 6 adults, 6 kids. There, we would all meet up and we camped, and we had somebody would have a dinner over here. And looking back at the pictures, I mean, they're amazing. We had some amazing experiences. But is I was trying to finish this big house in Dallas, really complicated, probably in hindsight over my head from a complexity level going into it. But now that I've done it, I could do it again, no problem, whatever. But we were drinking a lot, and that was just something everybody seemed to be doing. And it was a way to just, escape from the realities of the world, and then online school, and everybody on top of each other and nobody had their space. So I know it was crazy for a lot of people, and it was crazy for me from an anxiety standpoint. I was as low. That was the worst, just the worst time for me, just from being nervous for my family, for the build, for worrying about all the investments that you made. Is this whole world gonna implode? Which I'm still not certain that it's gonna go. I mean, we're still holding our breath in some levels, but there's some strange things still going on, with COVID and other things. But so after we all came back, a person that I'd built, Steve and Nicole, that I'd built the house for, I'd built their house years before and developed a close relationship with. Well, Steve, kept calling me like, you need to come up to the studio and take my class and this and that. So I said no 2 or 3 times and finally went up there. And it was the best thing that I could have done at the time to get myself out of that anxious, not working out, just worry. And I not instantly felt it. I'd say several classes in, and then later took the yoga class which I had taken. I just would feel during that time of drinking and anxiety, your body stiffens up like a lot. I mean, compared to when I started yoga to now, the flexibility, the mobility is, I don't know how to calculate it, but it's incredible. And as far as how, so all that and just the amount of peace and not worrying. I really don't. When I go to yoga, if I can get a good yoga session in, I think everything else is just kind of like whatever.
Yeah. I know you told me that. You're like, if I could do this, I could take on anything. I feel it just puts things into perspective. It kind of takes you when you're in those like anxious moments, you're having all this fear, or, this is something that I've been reading about too, is like we wake up and we're looking for problems. And like that's just what our body is responsive to. So I feel like if you wake up and you go to a yoga class, and I know you take classes in the morning, and that's part of the reason why I do, it immediately shifts your energy away from like reactive, responsive, what's going on, what is my to-do list, into like a state of abundance and a state of like, okay, here I am now. I'm in the present moment. How can I shift this into a positive? And it changes the course of your day. So it's just crazy how when you see people, and I think a lot of people do think we're crazy. They're like, how is this possible? How is this possible? And it's just, I mean, there's a lot of science behind it too, of just breathing and the energy shift that you have from a workout. I mean,
it's funny when somebody new comes in, like one of my contemporaries guys come in, and they totally freak out and they are just walking around the mat. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that, and it's so hot, and they're just like frustrated or something like that. And I want to tell them, all you have to do is just breathe. I mean, really, what do we all have to do on this earth to, that's it, breathe. I guess you have to eat and drink water eventually and all that. But when things get real weird and real hot or real tough, just breathe.
He's going to be a yoga teacher before we No, it is true. I just think it teaches you a lot about yourself. I know when I first started getting into yoga, I was kind of in a similar place in my life where I was just anxious. I wasn't happy with who I was. This was in high school. I felt like I went through an identity crisis like 8 years earlier than most people do. And I just remember like coming onto the mat, and it just, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just like a feeling, and everything just seems a lot lighter. I'm not as dramatic as I used to be. I feel like if problems occur, I'm like, okay, whatever, just got to move on past it. It's not the end of the world. Versus I feel like if I'm not practicing continuously or I'm not working out, I feel like I'm much more reactive and much more anxious and not as calm, or my response is not as gentle.
I agree 100%. You said it really well.
I feel like it just takes years of practice, and you've only been going for like a little over a year now?
Yes, but I did some other yoga, but I just did it to stretch because I was so tight or something like that, maybe like once every couple weeks kind of thing. But the serious, like is 4 or 5 times a week has just been in the last year or so or less. But it's I encourage people to not yoga, but there's a lot of different movements, even walking or some people say cycling
Yeah.
can be that way, where it's a running. It's just a meditative movement where you're really just focusing on the breath and, and we do listen to music in class and things like that. But I do feel like I kind of zone out there for a good, hour, and you don't even realize how, hot it is or how much you're sweating or something like that. And I think this day and age with all the crazy amount of tasks and things, in my opinion, this is all a big science experiment as far as are humans capable of this much interaction and connectivity and all things really like that. And it is. Nobody knows, because just 150 years ago, here, especially where the ranch is, the Comanche Indians were, running the land, and there weren't phones.
Yeah.
If things went wrong, you had to figure it out. You had to survive. You had to live, and but also, I don't know what it was like back then. There wasn't, social media. There wasn't news feeds. I mean, the things we're doing now compared to just in the old days, you were probably just like taking care of your children and trying to get enough food to sustain yourself. Whereas these days, there's so many things to worry about. I mean, there's everything to be worried about, really, if you really go down the rabbit holes of everything, because that's what gets the eyeballs,
Yeah, it's all, which I think is something that's really hard, especially for younger generations. And maybe this is something that you've seen with your kids. I think it's hard to, when you're consuming all of this, to really find, you're staring at a screen all day. And I feel like people just start to, where there's so much comparison going on. There's so much, they're at this place, they're at this place. I mean, I'm 25 and I find myself doing, if I'm on social media too much, which is why I limit my time. I don't have it after a certain time in the day. There's periods where I will go a few days without it, just because I feel like it's overwhelming and you start to like lose yourself in this content instead of being present with your family or going on a trip and not being on your phone the whole time. I mean, it's just a different time. And I know my parents don't even understand it. They're like, what's a podcast? I mean, my dad didn't even know what a podcast was. I don't even think he still knows how to listen to a podcast. My mom doesn't even know how to press play. And I mean, they're in their early 60s. It's not like they're super, I mean, they're definitely not young, but they're not super old. It's just kind of crazy how much times have changed. So
the question is all this technology and connectivity making people happier? And I would argue
it's not.
It's not. It's
No.
making people crazy. It's from an anxiety standpoint, and it's not. But how do you change that? I mean, you can change it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, it's kind of countercultural, but it's all around us, and I think we're all really affected by it, and we're just not being totally honest on how much we are affected by it.
Yeah, I think 1000% it's true. I think I couldn't imagine having, I mean, I just know of like friends and family members or neighbors and stuff like that they have young kids that are going through it, and as parents, and they're struggling a lot, just like how to guide their kids through it, of like they're seeing this or seeing that, which is a whole conversation for another day, but it's something hard. And for people out there, that's why I love this podcasting platform, because I think it's the only content that you choose to consume, versus I think, and it's on Instagram, you're scrolling, TikTok, whatever it is, you're just mindlessly going through it, versus a podcast, it's most of the time educational. But I just think there's a lot out there right now that's,
I agree, and I do love podcasts for that reason. I listen to them, instead of, some people watch them as well, but
yeah.
it's nice to just listen to a long form, nuanced conversation that opens up somebody's ideas, rather than just hearing the little soundbite of outrage or whatever. So for me, you get to talk or listen to some of the some really interesting people where, and that wasn't available 20 years ago or 15, I don't know, whenever podcast started.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, as we begin to wrap up this podcast, I always love to ask the question, if there's 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you want to leave the audience with, whether it's along the lines of going into building houses or the sod business, if it's business related, or if it's just life advice that you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah. Just since we're coming off that subject, and I probably wouldn't have been this advice, but we're just kind of to piggyback on that, it would be to find ways to be more present and not, because I think you will be less anxious and a happier person. I know for myself, that's the truth.
Mhm.
And I would say, I didn't used to like to exercise, but I did it anyway, just to, had to do it, or but I've now learned to to really enjoy it. So
Mhm.
looking at it from a different perspective of like, oh, I've got to go work out, and but as I think as you get older, but I think for anybody, it's just been a great source of mental health, really.
Mhm.
To So I guess those 2 bits of advice is move, and do something, even if you don't like it. You will be a better person mentally if you can just push into it. And when it does get a little hard, know that you're not going to die. It's going to be okay. And maybe when things get a little hard, you might grow a little. You will grow. So
Yeah. I love that. I feel like there's a famous quote. I don't know what it is. It's like the tough times or something make you grow the most. Spider, do you know what I'm talking about? Anyone? I don't know what the quote is. We'll cut this part out. Okay. Anyways, now that I forgot that quote on the podcast, I should write this stuff down. There is one final question that I have for you, which I don't know if I told you this, but it is, what are you grateful for today?
I'm really grateful for a lot of things. And it's something that I've, when I was not, doing good during quarantine, I think I was like not being grateful for things, and kind of, telling myself, oh yeah, this is that, or whatever, it's too hard. But I am grateful for, the ability to move and continue to go to class. I'm grateful for, my children, that they're healthy and growing. And yeah, there's some strange times, and yeah, but I just, I'm grateful to be alive and be able to keep going.
That's
And
such a good
new
one.
adventures,
New
like a podcast.
That's why I have you on here. And I am grateful for, my mom actually had her last, hopefully, fingers crossed, surgery so that she should be able to walk again. So that is good news. It was a success. The doctor said that she should be fixed. So that is good news coming out of today. And thank you all for tuning in. And thank you, Ryan, for being on. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you.